Yarrow. A weed so common you've probably walked past it 100 times without a second glance. Cherokee healers didn't walk past it. They packed it directly into open wounds, and the infection stopped. That's not legend. That's documented. A clinical trial in 2013 found that yarrow ointment measurably reduced wound pain and inflammation. This plant grows in backyards across most of North America. It costs almost nothing to find. And for most of human history on this continent, people knew exactly what it could do. So why don't we? The Cherokee didn't stumble onto yarrow. This knowledge was deliberate, tested across real conditions, passed carefully through generations, and refined into something dependable. Ethnobotanical surveys conducted in the late 1800s documented its use in Cherokee communities with specificity. There was a name for it, a method for it, a clear understanding of what it was for, when it worked, and how to apply it. This wasn't superstition. This was organized, practical, inherited knowledge. And here is the first thing that should genuinely stop you. Daniel Moorman's Native American Ethnobotany Database, one of the most comprehensive records of indigenous plant knowledge ever assembled, lists yarrow as a documented remedy across more than 100 distinct native nations across North America. Not one group, not a regional overlap. Over 100 separate peoples from different regions with entirely different languages and traditions, all independently landing on the same plant for the same wound applications. When that kind of continent-wide convergence appears in the historical record, it doesn't signal folklore. It signals consistent, observable, repeatable results. Stay with me, because the scale of this is much bigger than it first looks. A few years back, I came across something that made all of this very concrete. An old Appalachian remedy cabinet, the kind that sat in the back room of a family homestead, still contained its original contents. Tucked among the dried roots and bark strips was a small bundle of dried yarrow. Beside it, folded into a square, a piece of paper in someone's old handwriting. 4 words: pack the wound, stop the bleed. No measurements, no explanation. Just the instruction, written the way you write something when the results are too obvious to argue with. Here is what we now know about why those 4 words worked. Yarrow contains specific compounds, achillitin and achillin, both documented in pharmacological literature as anti-hemorrhagic agents. They actively support the clotting process at the wound surface. At the same time, yarrow's natural tannins create a mild antimicrobial environment in the surrounding tissue, building a basic barrier against the contamination that turns a small wound into a dangerous infection. 2 functions, 1 plant, available for free in fields across an entire continent. That is not magic. That is chemistry. Simple, old, naturally occurring chemistry that anyone can understand. So ask yourself this: why does a $20 antiseptic spray sit in your bathroom cabinet while this plant grows unrecognized in your backyard? The Cherokee weren't alone in figuring this out. By the mid-1800s, yarrow had collected a second name in American herbal texts: soldier's woundwort. Some sources called it military herb. These weren't poetic labels. They were functional descriptions. Civil War field surgeons, operating in conditions where standard medical supplies ran out within hours of major engagements, reportedly turned to yarrow as a wound packer when nothing else was available. Not because of tradition, not out of desperation alone. Because in field conditions, with real casualties and visible results, it performed. Think about that for a second. In some of the most brutal, high-stakes medicine this country has ever seen, the answer was a roadside weed. It stopped the bleeding, it reduced the risk of surface infection, and it was growing in every field and along every road within reach of those camps. So at what point did something trusted on a Civil War battlefield quietly become a folk myth? Here is the part nobody ever tells you. By the early 1900s, yarrow had nearly disappeared from published home remedy guides, not because any new study disproved it. The timeline of its disappearance maps exactly onto the rapid commercial expansion of packaged antiseptic products, bottles, branded solutions, patented formulas that companies could manufacture, distribute, and resell indefinitely. The plants didn't change. The economics around medicine did. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 and the regulatory structures built around it in the decades that followed didn't outlaw yarrow. But they created a legal environment where making any medicinal claim about a plant product became financially and legally risky. The plants weren't banned. The language around them was silenced. And without the language, the knowledge faded. Within a generation, it was gone from most households. Not because it stopped working, because a weed you could pick for free didn't fit inside a system designed to sell you the solution. By 1962, yarrow had been formally reviewed for possible pharmacological listing and then quietly removed from consideration. We will come back to 1962, because what happened in that review is the part that changes everything. That 1962 review did not happen in isolation. To understand what it meant, you have to back up 80 years. In 1882, yarrow appeared in the United States Pharmacopoeia. That matters more than most people realize. The United States Pharmacopoeia is not an herbal magazine. It is not a folk remedy collection. It is the official federal standard for medicinal substances in this country, the document that determines what gets classified as a legitimate pharmaceutical agent and what gets left outside that definition. In 1882, yarrow was inside that document. It had earned its place through documented use, observable results, and enough professional consensus to make it onto the official list. Then, edition by edition, quietly, without public announcement or scientific refutation, it was removed. The timing is not coincidental. The late 1800s and early 1900s marked the rapid professionalization of pharmaceutical manufacturing in America. Industrial chemistry was scaling. Patent medicine was becoming patent drug. The entire infrastructure of modern commercial medicine was being built. And it was being built around compounds that could be synthesized, standardized, owned, and sold at volume. A wild plant that grew in fields and roadsides did not fit that infrastructure. Not because it lacked evidence, because it lacked a business model. This is where it changes. Here is the structural fact that explains almost everything. Yarrow cannot be patented. A wild plant in its natural form is not eligible for intellectual property protection under U.S. law. No pharmaceutical company could invest in yarrow research, bring it to market, and then own the returns. The investment had no ceiling. The ceiling is what makes pharmaceutical development financially rational. Without it, yarrow was simply not worth pursuing, not because the science was weak, but because the science couldn't be monetized. Not because yarrow stopped working, because yarrow couldn't be owned. That distinction is not a conspiracy, it is a business logic that anyone can follow. And once you see it, you start to see it everywhere in the history of plant-based remedies. Now here is the payoff I promised you, that 1962 review, the one that ended without yarrow making any official list. For decades, that looked like the final word. But in 1999, the World Health Organization published Volume 2 of their monographs on selected medicinal plants, a series designed to evaluate traditional plant remedies against existing scientific evidence. Yarrow was included. The World Health Organization monograph on Achillea millefolium formally acknowledged its wound healing and anti-inflammatory properties as both traditionally supported and scientifically plausible. Not fringe, not anecdotal. Plausible enough for an international health body to put its name on it. That document is publicly available. Anyone can read it. It was published 26 years ago, and most people have never heard it exists. Notice what that means? The Cherokee knowledge, the Civil War field application, the 1882 USP listing, and then, after decades of institutional silence, the World Health Organization monograph quietly confirming the same core properties. The evidence didn't disappear. It just stopped being amplified. And then came 2013, a peer-reviewed clinical trial, not an herbalist's blog, not a wellness website, a published scientific study, tested yarrow ointment on wound healing in human subjects. The results showed measurable reduction in wound pain and measurable reduction in inflammation. That is the study I mentioned in the first 60 seconds of this video. That is the anchor I dropped at the beginning. And here is why it matters so much now. It closes the circle completely. Cherokee field knowledge, Civil War battlefield application, World Health Organization documentation, peer-reviewed modern clinical findings, all of them pointing in the same direction, all of them sitting in the public record, all of them largely ignored by the systems that shape what ends up in your medicine cabinet. That chain of evidence didn't require anyone to suppress anything dramatically. It only required that no one with financial resources had any reason to amplify it. And they didn't. So what does this mean for you right now in your actual life? Yarrow grows across most of North America. It is identifiable by its feathery, finely divided leaves and its flat-topped clusters of small white flowers. It grows in fields, along roadsides, at the edges of gardens, in places most people walk past without a second thought. Dried yarrow is also widely available through herb suppliers and small natural food shops, often for a few dollars. For minor surface cuts, slow-healing scrapes, and general surface inflammation, it is the kind of plant that belongs in the same drawer as your bandages and witch hazel. Not as a replacement for serious medical care, as a piece of practical plant knowledge that used to be ordinary household literacy and can be again. The Cherokee didn't invent magic. They paid attention. Across generations, through careful observation and accumulated experience, they built a working knowledge of what the land around them could actually do. That knowledge was documented. It was confirmed repeatedly, and it was quietly edged out, not because it was wrong, but because the systems built around selling you packaged solutions worked better when that knowledge stayed marginal, unfamiliar, and forgotten. You're not a conspiracy theorist for knowing this. You're just paying attention. Did you know yarrow grew near you? Drop your location in the comments and let's find out how many people are sitting next to a free medicine cabinet right now. And stay close, because next time we're looking at another Cherokee plant that early American doctors actually tried to have classified as a controlled substance. Not because it was dangerous, because it was too useful and too easy to grow in your own backyard.